son Ian had kidney cancer when he was just 10 months old. His doctors told us if he survived surgery and if he survived chemo and radiation, he would probably still need a transplant by the time he was a teenager. Here's Ian 4 months after his surgery. See the scar? We call that his zipper. If Ian had to wait for someone to die to get a kidney, he'd only have a 15% chance of getting a transplant. So right from the beginning, I was ready to give Ian one of my own kidneys should his remaining kidney fail. For most people, getting a transplant is even harder than it would be for Ian. The world average is about 4 organs available for every 100 people who need one. And of those people, 90% need a kidney. Even if everyone agreed to donate their organs when they died, we'd still have a huge shortage. Why? Well, because over 99% of people who die are too ill, too injured, or too far from the hospital when they die for their organs to be of any use for transplant. So, until we can grow usable organs in a lab, our only realistic option for reducing the organ shortage is to increase the number of living donors. But how? How can we encourage living donation without risking exploitation of poor people abroad or at home? In 2007, I learned that some Iranian doctors were claiming that they had found an ethical way to solve the kidney shortage. So many lives in other countries depended on whether what they were saying was true, yet no one I knew wanted to go to Iran to see what was happening. That's when I realized I might have to go to Iran myself. Fortunately, an Iranian-American nephrologist agreed to help me with my research. This is Dr. Bahar Bastani, who, by the way, is in the audience here today. Officially, we were in Iran on a lecture tour, but our real purpose was to interview everyone we could who had anything to do with arranging kidney matches in Iran. Over a 2-month period, we went to 6 transplant regions, and together we collected over 200 stories on film. Don't get me wrong, many things about Iranian society bother me, but that's what makes it so interesting that Iran, of all places, seems to have found a way to solve its kidney shortage that is both ethical and practical. Part of that solution was, like in most countries, to use organs from patients who die in the hospital. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about living kidney donation, because that's what Iran does differently than any other country. Okay, so how does living kidney donation work in Iran? For one, Iran used to allow, but no longer permits, foreigners to buy kidneys in Iran. Now, with very limited exceptions for refugees, the Iranian system of organ donation is for Iranian citizens only. Every once in a while, there's a scandal when foreigners manage to cheat the system, but consider the difference between a dozen or so violations in Iran over a decade and 1,000 or more Americans who buy kidneys illegally every year. The most important innovation made in Iran was putting nonprofit charities in charge of kidney matching. In every other country, it's doctors, hospitals, or for-profit brokers who arrange living donations. But in Iran, it's Iranian NGOs that manage the whole process. They interview potential donors and recipients, they schedule medical and psychological testing, and they provide a wide variety of social services for both donors and recipients. At this point, I'm going to stop talking about the support given kidney recipients, because what's really fascinating about Iran is the benefits offered donors. Donors get cash that comes in some combination from recipients, charities, and the government. The NGOs put most of the money in escrow before donation, and release it to the donors immediately after surgery. But donors also usually get non-cash benefits arranged through the Iranian NGOs. These benefits include things like a year or more of health insurance for donors, and sometimes their families too, dental care, eye care. Donors may get small business loans, education, job services, and even food, clothing, and household items. When we got back from Iran, and I calculated what people had earned and what they got for their kidneys, we discovered that on average in money, goods, and services, donors received twice the average individual annual income in Iran for the year we were there. That's about the same as $100,000 in the US today. It's true that some of the donors we interviewed were poor, or even very poor, but most donors and recipients were middle class. The reason Iran doesn't have a black market in kidneys is that it has a legal alternative. Why would Iranian kidney donors risk arrest or being cheated by criminal organ brokers when they have a well-funded and safe legal alternative? As Omid told us, he'd rather get paid through an Iranian NGO than try to get more illegally from a foreigner. Niku said payment is necessary, but less important than saving a life. He told us if he had known he could save someone's life by selling a kidney, he would have done so sooner. And Azita, she only took enough money to cover her expenses because she was donating her kidney to please God. In other words, she wanted to tip the karmic balance in her favor, or as some might say, she was paying it forward. When I got back from Iran, I wanted to make a documentary film about what I'd learned. But like Azita, I also wanted to do good. I'd been saving my extra kidney for my son, Ian, but Ian was 21 and doing fine. I was 50, and let's face it, not getting any younger. So I looked into donating one of my kidneys to someone else. This turned out to be harder than I'd imagined. My first idea was to help my friend Steve. By then, Steve had been on dialysis for almost 4 years. Sadly, I found out Steve was too ill to survive transplant surgery. He died a few months later. Steve was only 54. Next, I thought to help my friend Maury. Maury and I were a medical match, and I passed all my psychological tests, but then the transplant center said no. The living donor coordinator decided I didn't have enough of a support group to donate. That's to say, not enough relatives, friends, or cash to have someone take care of those things I shouldn't do on my own while recovering from surgery. You see, I live on a small farm, and I would need someone to help me with chores for maybe 3 months or so. My husband and sons couldn't give up their own lives that long, and we couldn't afford a farmhand. Maury, he was willing to hire someone to help me. But in the US, as in other countries, it's against the law to help donors with such expenses. A year later, Maury was dead. He was 59. At first, I was devastated and overcome with grief. And then I realized I wasn't alone. Many donors have trouble paying donation-related expenses. Maybe I could do something to help stop what happened to Maury and me from happening to others. Now, in the US, donors usually don't have to pay their own medical costs, but they and their families have other expenses. For example, travel and lodging expenses, lost income, vacation, sick leave, and disability benefits, time and money spent on child care, elder care, pet care, and household responsibilities, And most easily overlooked, lost productivity and opportunity costs. In the US, organ recipients are allowed to reimburse donors travel, lodging, and lost wages. Of course that helps, if recipients have enough money. But what if they don't? And what about other expenses, like those I just listed, or that farmhand I needed? I'm not suggesting that anyone copy the Iranian model per se, but after 30 years of experimenting with living kidney donation, places like Esfahan and Mashhad seem to have discovered something important. In those regions, the NGOs understand that taking good care of living kidney donors honors their sacrifice and shows their value to society, which in turn gets more people to donate. Now, Iran is not the only country trying to treat living donors better, but it is the only country where there are waiting lists of people who want to donate. Imagine that. A waiting list of donors. Not 100,000 people waiting for organs, but people waiting to donate. What seems to matter most to donors aren't benefits like tax credits or life insurance, but having a way to pay all their expenses as they occur. I can't help but feel my friends Steve and Maury didn't have to suffer as they did. We don't want to inflict their fate on hundreds of thousands of other kidney disease patients, and we don't have to. If a country like Iran can figure out a way to provide for living organ donors in an ethical and responsible way, maybe we can too. Thank you.